He walks into the room and someone automatically assumes he knows what he's doing. You walk into the same room and someone automatically assumes you need help. This is not your imagination. This is not your insecurity. This is a documented pattern that happens thousands of times a day across the world. And it starts long before either of you realize what's happening. When you were 7 years old, you were already receiving messages about what was expected of you. Boys were encouraged to take up space, to be loud, to fail in public and laugh it off. Girls were encouraged to be careful, to be quiet, to fail in private and feel ashamed. By the time you reached puberty, these messages had calcified into something that felt like your own personality, your own choices, your own natural way of being. But it wasn't natural. It was constructed. What you deserve to know is that every advantage you see men having, and there are many, was not given to them because they earned it. It was given to them because the system was built by men, for men, and it continues to function that way even when no one is consciously trying to maintain it. The system has its own momentum. It perpetuates itself. And you have been trained to believe that your struggle within that system is your own failure. Let me show you what men are getting that you don't know about. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you can't unsee it, everything changes. The first thing men get is permission. Permission to be ambitious without being called aggressive. Permission to be direct without being called rude. Permission to take risks without being called reckless. Permission to fail without being permanently marked as a failure. When a man fails at something, the narrative is that he tried something difficult and didn't succeed this time. When you fail at something, the narrative is that you weren't capable enough to begin with in your 20s. You probably noticed this, but didn't have the language for it yet. You saw men around you, men with similar education, similar intelligence, similar starting points, being offered opportunities that weren't offered to you. You watched them accept promotions without the same internal struggle you felt. You watched them negotiate salaries without the same guilt. And you told yourself that they were simply more confident, more assertive, more willing to push themselves forward. But that's not quite true. What was actually happening is that they were operating in a system that was designed to reward their behavior, while you were operating in a system that was designed to punish yours. When a man is assertive, he's called a leader. When you're assertive, you're called difficult. When a man negotiates for more money, he's called ambitious. When you do the same thing, you're called ungrateful or greedy. The exact same behavior produces different social consequences depending on your gender. You deserve to know that this wasn't about your personality. This was about the structure you were operating within. The second advantage men receive is the benefit of the doubt. When a man makes a mistake at work, people generally assume it was a one-time error, a momentary lapse in judgment, something that won't happen again. When you make a mistake at work, people often assume it reveals something about your capability or your commitment. A man can have a bad day. You have bad days that become part of your permanent record. This plays out in countless small ways that compound over time. A man speaks up in a meeting and is considered thoughtful. You speak up in the same meeting and are considered aggressive. A man takes a lunch break and no one notices. You take a lunch break and someone comments that you must have had a lot to do. A man leaves work on time and is seen as efficient. You leave work on time and are seen as uncommitted. The standard being applied to your behavior is different. It's higher. It's stricter. And no one even acknowledges that the standard exists. By your 30s, you've probably internalized this so deeply that you've started policing your own behavior without anyone asking you to. You've learned to make yourself smaller, to apologize for things that aren't your fault, To take responsibility for problems that are systemic, not personal. You've learned that being woman in a professional environment requires a constant performance of humility and gratitude that men simply don't have to maintain. You deserve to know that this exhaustion you feel, this constant effort to appear likable while remaining competent, to be strong while remaining feminine, to be ambitious while remaining grateful, this is not something you're failing at. This is something being done to you. This is a system that requires you to perform in contradictory ways simultaneously, and then judges you for the impossibility of the task. The third thing men receive is economic advantage that has nothing to do with merit. On average, a man with a college degree will earn $700,000 more in his lifetime than a woman with the same degree. This is not because men work harder. It's not because men are smarter. It's because the system is structured to pay men more for the same work, to promote men faster into higher paying positions, and to value the work that men do more highly than the work that women do. But here's the part that's even more insidious. You probably don't experience this as injustice. You experience it as your own financial limitation. You think you made wrong choices. You think you didn't negotiate hard enough. You think you didn't work hard enough. You internalize the gap in your paycheck as a personal failing rather than as evidence of a system that was never designed to compensate you equally for your labor. When a man and a woman do identical work, the man is more likely to be promoted. When they both seek advancement, the man is more likely to receive it. When they both ask for raises, the man is more likely to get one. These are not rare occurrences. These are documented patterns. These are statistical realities. And yet, somehow, you've probably blamed yourself for not receiving what you were entitled to. By your 40s, if you've been working continuously, you've probably watched yourself fall further and further behind men who entered the workforce at the same time you did. Not because they're better at their jobs, but because the system rewards them for qualities that get punished in you. Because the system invests in their development while limiting your opportunities. Because the system treats their ambition as ambition and your ambition as selfishness. You deserved to know that this wasn't about you. This was about a system that was rigged from the beginning. The fourth thing men receive is protection from the consequences of their own desires and ambitions. A man can pursue a career, and no one questions whether he's sacrificing his family. A man can work long hours, and no one assumes he's neglecting his children. A man can prioritize his career, and this is simply called ambition. When you do the same things, you're called a bad mother, a selfish woman, someone who doesn't have her priorities straight. This is where the system becomes truly cruel, because it doesn't just punish you for your ambition. It forces you to choose between incompatible things. You can have a career and be judged as a bad mother. You can be a devoted mother and be judged as uncommitted to your work. You cannot have both. Main Kung. They operate in a world where ambition and family are not contradictory. For you, they are presented as a zero-sum game where choosing one means failing at the other. But here's what no one tells you. This isn't natural. This isn't inevitable. This is a social structure that was deliberately created and that is deliberately maintained. The reason men can have it all is not because they're better at time management or because they care less about their families. It's because society has decided that a man's time is valuable for both his career and his presence at home, while a woman's time must be divided between the two. And she will be judged as inadequate at both. The deepest part of this injustice is that you've probably internalized the judgment. You've probably looked at other women who made different choices than you did and felt superior or judged. You've probably thought that if women just worked harder, managed their time better, prioritized differently, they could have it all. But you're not seeing the system. You're seeing only the women. And you're measuring them against an impossible standard that men never have to meet. You deserve to know that this wasn't about individual women making better or worse choices. This was about a system that makes certain choices impossible while pretending they're simply personal failings. The fifth thing, and this is the revelation that changes everything, men get the luxury of not having to think about these things. A man doesn't wake up in the morning calculating how to appear competent without appearing aggressive. A man doesn't spend his career wondering if he's being taken seriously or if he's being taken seriously for the wrong reasons. A man doesn't have to navigate a professional environment where his appearance, his marital status, his reproductive choices, and his domestic responsibilities are all considered relevant information about his professional capability. This is perhaps the deepest privilege, the privilege of not having to be aware that you're operating within an unjust system. The privilege of being able to attribute your success entirely to your own merit, without having to acknowledge the structural advantages that enabled that success. The privilege of being able to fail without that failure being evidence against your entire gender. When you see a man succeed, you see individual excellence. When you see a woman succeed, you're seeing someone who succeeded despite the system. And the system has taught both of you to interpret her success as exceptional rather than as evidence that she was capable all along. What happens between minute 12 and minute 14 is that you finally understand something that reframes everything you've experienced. The reason you've been struggling is not because you're not good enough. The reason you've been struggling is because you've been operating within a system that was never designed to let you succeed. And the moment you understand that, you stop blaming yourself. And the moment you stop blaming yourself, you become dangerous to the system that depends on your self-blame to function. Because a woman who understands that her struggles are systemic, not personal, is a woman who will demand change. A woman who understands that she's been operating on an uneven playing field is a woman who will stop accepting the idea that the uneven results are her fault. A woman who understands that men are receiving advantages she doesn't know about is a woman who will stop internalizing her own disadvantage as personal failure. You are not wrong. The system is wrong. The system that told you to be ambitious but not too ambitious, to be competent but also likable, to be strong but also nurturing, to prioritize your career and also your family, to make 70 cents for every dollar a man makes, and then blame yourself for the gap. The system that gave men permission to take up space while teaching you to make yourself small. The system that rewarded men for the same behavior it punished you for. That system is wrong, and you deserve to know that what you've been experiencing is not your failure. It's not your inadequacy. It's not your inability to juggle everything perfectly. It's systematic. It's structural. It's intentional. And it's been designed so carefully that you couldn't even see it happening. The question I want you to sit with is this: what would change if you stopped trying to succeed within a system that was never designed for you to succeed? What would change if you stopped accepting the rules of a game where you're not allowed to win? What would change if you demanded that the system change instead of continuing to demand that you change to fit into it? In the next video, we're going to talk about what happens when women start refusing to accept these terms. We're going to talk about the women who looked at the system and decided that they weren't going to play by its rules anymore. Because that story of refusal and reconstruction, is the story where real power begins to emerge. You deserve better than this, not because you're special or exceptional, but because everyone deserves better than a system that requires them to operate with one hand tied behind their back while pretending that the race is fair. Leave a comment and tell me, which of these advantages did you not realize men were receiving until you heard them named out loud?